On today's show, 3 questions. Number 1, what does Walmart, the Fed, and commodities have in common? Number 2, is the IRS in trouble? And number 3, have we finally stopped spending money? Welcome to Dentist Money's 2 cents, where we help dentists navigate all the noise. I'm Matt.
And I'm Rabih.
Just the two of us today, Rabih. And I want the people to know what a champ you are. You're here.
Oh, thank you.
You're here with me, and you're under the weather. You're sick. So we're going to try to limit the time you have to talk.
I'm sick, yes.
Funny joke.
It's a funny joke because I can't stop talking.
We just can't stop yapping.
I'll just forget that I'm sick the moment I go into the topic. But
yeah, you're gonna
I'm
get all
sorry
excited.
for people who hate nasal audio, but we have to deal with it today.
No, you sound great. I just feel bad because you're sick, but the show must go on. We should just call this the Rabih Show. I'm just here, but let's jump in. We'll try to limit again. We might limit the time here that you have to talk. Keep it a shorter show, but let's just jump into the first topic. And well, really quick before we say anything, Rabih, because this is the first show back. I was gone last week. We'd recorded multiple before the game.
We have a big announcement.
You just got to get on air.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna gloat too much. I'm just gonna share.
You deserve it. I think you deserve it.
I'm just excited. It was a wonderful game. I watched it in Nicaragua. I called it. I just want to. It's very rare that I do this, but I was very, very confident, and they actually pulled it out. It was awesome.
Yeah. Now you have to tell us what the S&P 500 will do.
Yeah. No. I think that is my. I think I've exhausted my ability for premonition and being able to call things like this, but I'm just glad that they did not make me look like a fool, and they actually did do what I say they were going to do, which was, I didn't see that coming, but I did feel pretty confident the Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl, and they did that and then some. They left no doubt.
Yeah, as a devoted fan, I want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
I watched it for the sake of watching it, just so I avoid FOMO. Yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah, well, I have an Eagles jersey, Brian Dawkins, he's my favorite player of all time, Eagles jersey at my house. We just moved into our new office, so I'm going to bring that. It'll probably be my new background starting here pretty soon, so we'll have that. But okay, we digress. We'll move on. Just wanted to make sure we gave the Eagles their proper due. Okay, let's jump into the first topic. What does Walmart, the Fed, and commodities have in common?
Do you want to take a guess?
I mean, you had mentioned you're talking tariffs, so it was something to do with tariffs.
It is there. So let me tie all of this together. Last week, or like this week, we had earnings season continuing. We had the Federal Reserve issue their meetings from the January decision of no rate cuts. And we also had news in the media. Actually, throughout this week, on Wednesday, we actually hit an all-time high on the S&P 500. So all of that is happening while the market has been breaking new highs, and the all-time high rally actually got broken the moment Walmart decided to report their earnings. Although their earnings revenue has been really solid, and according to expectations beating it slightly, the guidance has been a little bit weaker. So the guidance said that the CFO of Walmart kind of said that the company would not be immune from looming tariffs on Mexico and Canada. He said that 2/3 of what Walmart, produces and engage the business it does is actually in the US. But if tariffs happen to become higher or more constricting or penalizing, Walmart is not going to be immune. And the market really took this as a big sign because Walmart is the largest company in terms of consumer sales. They said that profits might be lower, so this doesn't mean that sales might be lower. Walmart can just drop prices or adjust the quality. So for the same price, it's just a lower quality.
It's a nice way. Adjust the quality. It's a really nice way to be like, they just sell worse crap.
Well, yeah, actually, sorry, if I want to quote exactly what they said if there's been tariffs on different brands, we would leverage our own internal brand. So the private selections or what's it called? There's another brand for Walmart. Those stuff would just take more shelf space compared to the other ones.
Got it.
And given that news, the market hasn't been up or didn't break a new all-time high since that news come in, and the market's trying to digest it. So that was the first piece of information. The second piece of information is the Federal Reserve meeting that was issued, the meeting minutes. And in the meeting minutes, it's an open market committee. There's like 12 people discussing. So in the discussion, the idea of tariffs came in. And unanimously, is that how you say the word?
Unanimously. You're hopped up on drugs. It's okay.
I can't speak in normal situations, so consider now. Like, give me a break. Anyhow, and they all agreed that the impact of tariffs would be inflationary. And in that situation, it prompts them to wait even further and be more data dependent on the path of cutting interest rates. So if we were starting from a base level where without any addition of tariffs to the equation, the Federal Reserve was slowing down the path, maybe 2 cuts this year only, and see how it pans out in the market. Now that tariff has been added to the mix, they're just going to really wait to see whether inflation is going to kick back up. So the Fed kind of showed concern, although no tariffs has actually happened. But it's all about expectations of tariffs. The Walmart guidance is based off expectations, and the federal Fed funds meeting is also contingent on expectations. And the last thing that showed up was a new batch of announced tariffs. They didn't go into effect yet, but they are announced tariffs on aluminum and steel, as well as pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. So it's all across the board. And over here, I think we should start using ChatGPT as one of the co-hosts of the podcast. But I actually was able to summarize some good information because a lot has been going on. And as I've mentioned on previous podcasts, the market has not been moved but by tariffs. That's the only topic. We're getting CPI data, we're getting unemployment data, we're getting consumer sentiment. Although consumer sentiment today is low and it's affected the market, they usually aren't really moving the market as much as tariff talk. So I thought, let me give you a timeline and see how much has happened in a very short period of time, and follow the dates with me. Okay, January 20th, inauguration. The president announced plans to overhaul U.S. trading system and emphasize tariffs. January 25th, 5 days after, 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico were introduced, with only 10% on Canadian energy products, and then another 10% tariffs on all Chinese imports. That said, they're gonna go into effect on February 4th. On February 3rd, there were negotiations, and they decided to push the Mexico-Canada situation a month until they can negotiate. And then February 13th, the president issued a memorandum to develop, for his economic team, to develop plans for reciprocal tariffs. So if China or Mexico or Canada decide to retaliate, what would we use to retaliate back? And then February 14th. So they're like back to back. If this was a sports team, it would be exhausted. But back to back. On February 14th, the administration announced plans to impose 25% tariffs on auto imports effective April 2nd. So this is something to take in mind. The duration between when they are announced and when they are getting implemented is actually widening. And then February 17th, expansion of existing tariffs on steel and aluminum. It was declared, and it increases the tariffs from 10% on 25%. And it is set to kick in on March 12th, so a month later. February 18th, the president proposed tariffs on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals with rates set at 25% on higher. They are scheduled to start on April 2nd, 2025, along with auto import tariffs. And then February 19th, which is like before yesterday, the administration announced intention to impose 25% tariffs on lumber related products, and it's also scheduled on April 2nd. So quite the agenda, right?
It's a lot.
Hitting everyone left and right. And I found very interesting was the fact that all of these tariffs are affecting the market sentiment-wise, but all of them have a kick-in date that is at least a month later, which is what is being talked on the street, that all of these tariffs, because it is bad economic plan, it's just good politics. And it's more about negotiation. So here's where I actually involved ChatGPT, and I was like, hey, tell me about all those international policy tactics that they use, especially when they're trying to use the tariffs. And before we go into that, just to highlight, we've seen like Prime Minister of Japan and Prime Minister of Australia and European Union leaders all reach out to try to negotiate some exemption related to their countries or to their industries. So I think the goal of all these tariffs and this very heavy agenda that was imposed was to actually stir the pot a little bit and open room for negotiation on some other economic stuff.
You're saying the American agenda was to stir the pot, to open up the conversation more.
It's looking like that.
Yeah.
And the fact that a lot of, it just opened conversations for new negotiations, to new trade agreements to be drafted, simply because the administration showed willingness, but also left room for negotiation. So let me jump into what has been happening. So,
and really quick, Rabih, sorry, maybe you're going to hit this. But you're saying they're showing willingness to negotiate. An example of that would be like what happened specifically with Canada. Are you going to hit that? Okay. Are you going to hit? That's part of what you're going to hit.
it is gonna be there. I was like, so in the textbook, what is it that you impose tariffs but you don't let them kick in for a month? What is it? And the word for it is called delayed implementation as a negotiation strategy. It provides pressure and incentive, which politically this is what's happening. This approach leverages the threat of tariffs to extract concessions or prompt policy adjustments from trading partners, but also it has market and diplomatic considerations. Immediate tariffs can lead to market volatility and strain diplomatic relationships, so the delay acts more as a buffer to allow a change in policy to be smooth. And now there are other negotiation techniques, which actually showed up not in the US. The US is just imposing tariffs left and right. The other negotiation techniques actually happened from other countries and how they decided to retaliate. We know that Canada's and Mexico's response was different than that of China, different than that of Japan, different than that of Australia, of the European Union. So I'm going to start throwing these, textbook words of what they think the negotiation technique is and look at it from that perspective. So the first one is reciprocal tariffs, which we kind of, it's in the name. They'll just restrict tariffs on the other hand. But the other one is aggressive legalism. The third one is coalition building. And the final is take it or leave it offers. So those are the options negotiation-wise that can come up. When we think of reciprocal tariffs, it's what Canada decided to do. It's like, if you're going to tariff us, we're going to tariff you back. And that is, the head bumping way of doing the strategy. The legal activism or aggressive activism is when countries utilize international legal frameworks to challenge trade practices they deem unfair by filing disputes through the organizations like the World Trade Organization, the WTO. China did that exactly. So instead of retaliating or taking it to the news or making this a battlefield, the moment the 10% tariffs were imposed in China decided to reach out to the World Trade Organization and file a complaint against what has happened. There is the take it or leave it offer, which is a hardball tactic presenting a final offer with little room negotiation. This didn't really hit the US itself, but it was actually involved with companies related to Elon Musk, which we know is involved in the administration. And the conversation, I think it was by Canada's Ottawa mayor or governor, decided to cancel a trade agreement with, I think, Starlink. And the idea was like, it's a take it or leave it type of deal. You either follow what we want in terms of the economic, ping pong that we're playing, or you're not going to have that agreement with us.
Hey, Rabih.
Yeah, go
ahead. Well, I was going to say, can we go back really quick to the, I just don't want to brush over the China thing. So I'm trying to understand, they make this complaint to the WTO. What is the ramifications of that? What's the desired outcome? What's the WTO going to do, basically? Like, is this a just kind of administrative, like, we're going to file a complaint because we can, but what's actually going to come out of this? What's their hope of this?
Yeah, so just a little bit of background on the United Nations. The United Nations is made up of different organizations within it. It's like the WTO, UNHR, you've got the General Assembly, and you've also got the Security Council, and the only one that actually can take actions like launch war, impose sanctions, send troops, etc., is the Security Council. So all the other organizations that fall under the United Nations umbrella, all they do is issue press releases and more of a statement that goes into the record that can be used later on in international law cases, or issue suggestions on a way out of a policy.
It's like a international naughty or nice list. They just say, okay.
If you stick to a world where there is rule of law and there is a judicial system where you would want to collect proof, you would want to collect, the background of how things ended up happening, these organizations actually combine the narratives of three different all the different countries because it lays a common ground for them. So most probably it's just going to be a statement or a certain agenda with recommendations that get issued, or it just goes onto the record of if they want to negotiate a trade agreement later on and the United Nations was to be involved, they would say, well, there were concerns in previous trade agreements regarding X, Y, and Z. So let's include an amendment or a clause somewhere in this new agreement that would avoid this bottleneck going into the future, etc. So it's more legal. And if you think about it, it puts China in a position where they said, oh, we did not shy and be afraid of what was happening. We actually retaliated by issuing a complaint to the World Trade Organization. But the nature of that retaliation was de-escalationary rather than try to bump heads. Diplomacy at its best, you know? And the last one, which is what would be scary for the US, is coalition building. And it is when all smaller nations decide that altogether, for example, they would want to boycott American products. We're starting to see a bunch of that in Canada. I don't know if you guys have heard about the US versus Canada hockey game.
It's been wild.
Like, nothing on the ground has happened yet, but people have become charged simply because of the narrative and the way that's happening. And there was actually an interview on Canadian TV channels a couple of days ago where they were going into Costco, which is an American company, and they're asking Canadian shoppers whether they are buying American products. And they were like, no, we're only putting Canadian products in our carts. So that, you know, consumer nationalism in a sense will actually have ramification regardless of whether tariffs happen or not. And if this happens from all across the countries around the world against the US, that might be a negative sign where American policy will have to like adapt to that. You know, just to give you a metric that helps you visualize that, over 50% of all the revenue that companies in the S&P 500 make comes from outside the US. Mm-hmm. So the fact that if the rest of the world decides to isolate the US economically would not have an impact because we are mighty and strong. We are mighty and strong. But we are stronger when we are interacting with the international economy. We can survive on our own, but we are in a much better position when we are integrated in the system.
It would have a big impact. And to your point, Rabih, it's not even if the tariffs never took place, some of the damage has been done at the narrative level, which can change behavior, to your point. Like, the narrative right now is so negative, probably outside the US, and it's impacting, to your point, consumerism. I like what you said, kind of this consumer nationalism. That alone could be a huge impact over the coming couple of years.
Yeah. So we'll see how it pans out. In politics, you know, once in a while, the narrative can change and you'll change people's opinion really quickly about a certain agenda or person. So this is a revolving conversation. But what I found interesting is that whenever we wanted to address, and kind of like summarizing over here, address the idea of what is happening with tariffs and what's the impact going to be on the S&P 500 and the stock market and the economy, we keep saying it's complicated. We want to see what products are going to be tariffed and on which countries, and how will those countries retaliate and how will retaliate back. And until all of that is figured out, we will not know the impact on the economy. But when we look at it from the political lens, and I know we're not political commentators, but it was helpful in today's discussion, you kind of see that a textbook playbook is panning out. Like, there are certain tactics on how you deal with this. You're using economic factors to influence policy action and, you know, trade agreements, and just the push and pull between political powers, and that is panning out. Like, it's not really economic as much as it's political for this reason. And that's why we're able to come up with all these different examples and all these different branches of the different ways this can occur. So it just seems that, yes, this is causing us a lot of economic and stock market noise, but the source of this is political noise. And we were able to figure out the political noise without figuring out the economic noise in this up until now.
So a lot to still figure out. That's a great summary, Rabih, just to show that this could, I like that you're saying, like, it's this textbook approach. Like, there's nothing crazy or too scary about it right now. It could get there depending on which direction these countries go, right? Like, to your point about the coalition approach, hopefully this is, and there's signs of this, that it's just tactics by the U.S. to reopen negotiations. The hope is that this leads to just new agreements by the end of the year, but something we got to keep an eye on. So
you could open negotiation different ways. You don't have to be the toxic girlfriend, but this is where we are.
The toxic girlfriend. Wow. Okay. Is that what the U.S. is now? The toxic
I think
girlfriend?
so. Like you could open negotiation differently, but it's
Yeah,
fine.
there's more diplomacy we probably could use, but I've never heard it like that. I'm that's a good way to put it. Okay, anything else you want to add to this? I'm going to just comment how we were like, we're not going to make Rabih talk too much, and then we made you talk for 20 straight minutes. So I'm
It's
sorry,
fine.
Rabih.
No, it's good.
The rest of it, we figured we just hit a couple of highlights. So number one, we put, I should say number two question, is the IRS in trouble? I just thought it was worth mentioning. I'm sure everyone out there has been hearing things about Doge, Elon Musk, what he's doing across the board, really, to a lot of these administrations or kind of administrative kind of factions of the government, education department and whatnot. The one that I think probably makes dentists specifically's ears perk up the most would be the IRS. They've announced that they are laying off, and I believe it's official, Rabih. There's an estimated 15,000, I believe, employees that are going to be laid off is what the most recent report they're showing. So there's not a ton here. Again, these last couple of topics, we just wanted to kind of surface level hit because we don't know a ton of what the impact this could have. But, this kind of flies in the face of what the Biden administration did with the IRS a couple of years ago with approving $80 billion for the agency. The IRS was already having problems when it comes to staffing. Even the $80 billion the Biden administration approved, that was for hiring. But what people don't realize is how many people were retiring or leaving the IRS at the time. Like a lot of that money, I don't know the exact percentage, but it was significant. I want to say it was like 40% of that money was just to like hire and replace how many people they were already losing. And now Doge and Elon Musk is coming in and they're saying they're going to lay off another 15,000. I guess the main point of this is just saying, Rabih, should we even be paying our taxes anymore? Like maybe this is the year we get away with it. What do you think?
No one is going to be processing them. This is what we're.
That might be the advice. Absolutely not. Do not take that advice. That is not advice. It's more, again, just an interesting, saying kind of the same thing with the tariffs. Like, what is going to happen with this? Like, this could be a significant. They've made comments, whether they're real or not, or to your point, Rabih, this probably is in the same kind of vein as, is this just kind of reopening the discussions of like a new structure? But there's been comments made by Elon relatively recent about like not having income tax and how it relates to, I know I have the same reaction. I'm like, I don't know how this would work, but he's made comments around, could we replace enough revenue with tariffs and not have income tax?
I'm not going to go head to head with Elon, but I'll tell you what I've learned in school.
Please.
When it comes to having a country with a sound budget, aka the equivalent of it in a dentist or a human would be someone who does not spend more than they make and they are constantly in debt and they are racking credit card debt. Like a person who is on a sound financial step. When it comes to a country dynamics, the economy has to tax its constituents, especially in income tax. There are 3 different examples of countries that are dealing with income taxes. You've got countries, which is the majority, that are like the US, whereas your citizens, when they are employed, you are taking taxes from their income as well as other taxes, forms of taxes, and that's the most robust one and kind of the norm. The other situation is the country has been blessed with so many natural resources that it doesn't have to tax its citizens, but that's only because the country is so small compared citizen-wise and cost-wise compared to the amount of natural resources that it has. Think of the Gulf countries, think of Norway, think of these countries when you think of it. They are so rich simply because of all the gas and oil that they have. And the country size is so small, the population is so small, the income tax is not really required. And then the third one is that countries that do not have the natural resources, but they decide not to tax the income of the citizens, but instead they decided to tax income of businesses, value-added tax, aka taxes on stuff that you purchase when you go and you pay that 10%, 7%, whatever. Taxes on real estate, wealth, all other forms of taxes, but they exclude the income tax. History has shown us that those countries that exclude the income tax actually struggle because the majority of tax revenue comes from income. Everyone is going to have income, but not everyone is going to be spending. So, and because of that difference, it's much more profitable for a government from a tax revenue perspective to just tax income. Countries that do not do that end up actually borrowing, and that puts pressure on their currency and opens up a lot of bad economic possibilities. The most recent example I can think of is my home country of Lebanon. They kept on borrowing money and issuing bonds instead of taxing the citizens on their income, and we had a crisis larger than the Great Depression on paper. So those are the three examples, and I don't think we have an economic theory right now, just to tie it back to Elon, where we can sustain ourselves just based off with a country like the US without having to income the citizens. I don't know how tariffs are going to be doing that, because when you tax income, the consumption part of the economy goes down. But once you tax imports and exports, the tariffs, how will that, change and impact the big formula of the GDP? I really do not know. It's uncharted territory in economic theory.
Well, and it's tough to even know what's being said as actual policy, serious policy thoughts, or just kind of, again, we don't know the motivation of it, right? We don't know, we just highlighted in the theme here of around tariffs is what's the motivation behind the tariffs? Is it do they actually have the backbone to do it, or is it just simply opening up the discussion? I think that applies to this as well. Do I actually think they're saying we're going to get rid of income tax? No, you just highlighted all the reasons why in about a minute, right? Of saying this isn't going to work with the size of country we have, the citizens, it's just not going to happen. And I haven't looked at the numbers, but I would dare say you're not going to replace the revenue created from income tax with tariffs. Those numbers probably just don't line up.
It makes sense, because the U.S. consumer is 60 to 70% of the U.S. economy, whereas imports and exports are kind of 5 to 10%. So how much tariffs are you going to impose just to equate the numbers? And at that level of tariffs, do you still have any trading partners around the world?
Yeah.
I don't know how we get there.
Yeah, I'm with you. So we went down a rabbit hole we didn't necessarily mean to go down, but I think it's good to highlight. And the other, just really quick, the other thing, you could look at this at the state level, right? With the U.S., certain states don't have state income tax, but then they replace that with things like property tax are significantly higher. So it impacts the state economies differently. The biggest thing here, this probably doesn't impact dentists too much, or at least our listeners too much. But the thing that they're highlighting is when it comes to the IRS and these layoffs and some of the issues is if you're expecting a refund, which most of our clients and people, most dentists don't get those. But if you are expecting one, probably expect it to be severely delayed. And I think there's going to be some issues there when it comes to the IRS if you're trying to file early and get your refund.
Have you filed your taxes yet for this year?
No, I have not. Really? Not.
I did them last weekend. And I lost the whole weekend.
Yeah, I don't love. I mean, I need to. I'm going to here probably in the next month or so. I try to push it off a little bit. It's not the funnest thing in the world, as everyone out there knows. Okay, one other thing we wanted to, actually two other things we wanted to hit. But the third main question is, have we finally stopped spending money? The answer is really no, we have not. But we did want to hit a couple of highlights, and Rabih, I'm sure you'll have some commentary on this, but the retail sales, consumer retail sales, the report came out for January, and it dropped by almost a full percent, so 0.9%. It was the largest drop in a month we've seen for over 2 years. So it did show some slowing when it comes to retail sales. However, they did kind of revise this or going to give the reasons for it. They said likely weighed down by frigid temperatures, wildfires, motor vehicle shortages is what's led to kind of a sharp decline. The exact quote from one of the economists says, the drop was dramatic, but several mitigating factors shows there's no cause for alarm. So yes, it was a significant drop. They said, again, they're showing we haven't seen a drop like that for over 2 years, but because they're able to point to the reasons why, they're saying, I don't think this is a macro slowdown of the economy as much as it's just these, again, mitigating factors as they've highlighted. Rabih, any comments on this? We've highlighted so much about 60 to 70% of the GDP relies on consumerism. Obviously, that would be a huge leading indicator if we saw a trend in drop in this. As of now, it's not looking like a trend, but what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, retail sales as a data point is prone to seasonality. So on top of these factors that you just mentioned, there's also the fact that it is January and we just came off 2 months of holidays where we were spending like crazy. So the seasonality effect is there. People do definitely spend in the summer more than they spend in the winter. And another major point that we need to consider is that retail sales reports includes only goods, it does not include services. And the US economy has been moving more and more towards spending on services. And actually, where inflation still lingers is in services, with the exception of eggs. I don't want anyone to come at me next week, with the exception of eggs.
How dare you?
Yeah,
But that's also because
services.
the bird flu. So that's another mitigating factor there.
Yes. So the whole idea is that this is just a data point and not enough to draw a conclusion. But if it's bad, it's a negative data point. So you're gonna put it on the whiteboard as you are analyzing data, but you're not gonna overthink it until new data comes in.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is I was going to try to find, I had looked, I'm going to see if I can find this for February, why we will most likely see an increase to consumer spending and maybe retail sales in February. Rabih, do you want to give a guess to how much we spent on, or how much this was projected? So I don't know if it's been confirmed yet, but how much was projected to be spent in the US for Valentine's Day?
Okay, I was thinking either Valentine's, Super Bowl, or President Day skiing. Like those
All of
are
the
the
above,
things.
all of the above, but Valentine's specifically, we have the 2024 numbers. And then when I looked this up, it was the projected for 2025. So we'll have this number. We could have this number by next show, but do you have any
They spend, I would say, around 1 billion. Is that too low?
Rabih, $27.5 billion.
Whoa!
27. Well, that was the projected. So in 2024, we spent as Americans 25.8 billion. That was about $185 per person. In 2025, they were projecting it to be $188 per person, almost $189. $27.5 billion spent just on Valentine's Day. So I'm going to guess that the February numbers will be right back to where we need them to be to keep the economy going. So, okay. Well, last thing, just we'll highlight this. We don't have our resident experts. Shout out Taylor Setterfield. He is our resident. Him and Jake are our resident student loan experts. But we did want to highlight this pertinent to the dental space for sure. That just recently the U.S. Appeals Court blocked the SAVE plan, Biden administration's SAVE plan. So this is kind of like a broken record. We don't really know what this is going to be. This is going to keep battling in court. It's most likely going to go to the Supreme. It's going to go to the Supreme Court, I would imagine, or just continue to be battled. But as of now, the SAVE plan has been blocked. We'll update people and maybe get more detail. Probably dedicate an entire segment of what this is going to look like. But this just continues to be a battle and something that if this gets fully removed or it goes away, gets abolished completely, it's going to revamp a lot of what dentists are doing. If you signed up for this SAVE plan, you know what this could look like. Again, we'll bring Taylor and Jake on to maybe get some more details around this. But as of now, it's been blocked. So we'll
Enjoy
kind of
not
see.
paying, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Enjoy not paying, I guess, for now. We have literally some dentists, some clients that have not paid a student loan payment for 4 years. They've just been in forbearance and not paying. So I guess with that said, that's a good point, Rabih. One of the behavioral dangers that we need to highlight here is, and maybe something to be aware of as things get flushed out with this over the coming 6 months, 12 months, whatever, is probably going back and saying, like, have you been, like, if you haven't been paying for 4 years, what have you been doing with that money? Has that been being saved? Has that just been replaced by other spending? If you're not aware of that, if you haven't brought awareness to it, if you're not organized, you might want to take a step back, go look and see what that payment would look like on these different plans. Call us. We're happy to talk through this with you. But that's a great point, Rabih. Like something to bring up. Enjoy not paying, but don't replace that spending with something else. And then when your payment kicks back in, it could be a real problem. I mean, we've seen this in real life where situations where it's saving dentists $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, possibly, depending on what their situation is. That's a significant sum of money that could kick back in. And if you just replace that with other spending, that's going to be a real problem. So definitely something to think about. Rabih, any thoughts on that?
No, I love how you said it. It's, we've, on the topic of student loans, we've been kicking the can down the road, and once it reactivates, it's gonna be a swing in either direction, depending on what financial habits you've built around along the way. You're
Yeah.
either gonna be very stripped for cash and in a tough position, or you'll be someone sitting on excess savings that is able to pay the student loan much cheaper.
Yeah, definitely. Love it. Awesome. Okay, Rabih, any final thoughts? Thanks
All
for hanging
good.
in there.
No worries.
The energy picked up. Now you can go take a nap.
You know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to stay alive until June because we've got the summit.
What an incredible. Wow. Rabih, you're getting good at this, man. What's going on in June, Rabih, that you're trying to stay alive for?
The summit. It's probably, if I go to the summit and hang out with our clients and hang out with you guys, I'll have a couple more years in me. It'll just extend my life.
So what you're saying, it's been proven that coming to the Dentist Money Summit extends your life and adds.
Yes. If we can guarantee anything on this podcast,
yeah, if we can guarantee that coming to the Dentist Money Summit will extend your life and increase the well-being and quality of your life as well. That is data backed for sure. So I love that transition, Rabih. That is happening. Dentist Money Summit, second annual Dentist Money Summit in Park City, Utah, June 20th. Full new slate of speakers. If you want to know who's coming, we have some incredible speakers. Some of them going to be on the show here pretty soon. So you'll get some kind of highlights of who's going to be there. We released Chad Hymas? I actually don't remember, but we did an interview with Chad Hymas. That did come out, Rabih. I haven't listened to it, but so that was one of the examples. We've got several others that are going to be speaking. We'll have on the show here pretty soon. But if you have any questions, dentistmoneysummit.com. Also, if you're out there listening and you're thinking, man, I need to do something. I know I need to do something about my money. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling unorganized. I'm feeling like there's something I need to be doing here. And I just need help. We're here to help. We talk to hundreds of dentists all over the country, answer questions, point you in the right direction. dentistadvisors.com, set up a consultation. We'd love to talk to you, see how we can help. We're not scary. I promise we're pretty nice. We're pretty fun, and we definitely want to add some value. So with that said, we hope you got something out of the show. Thank you for listening. Rabih, thanks for hanging in there. That was our 2 cents. Till next time, have a good weekend. Bye-bye.